Welcome to this opening tutorial on Flexcom's user interface. My name is Angus Conley and I'm the product manager for Flexcom software. In this tutorial and subsequent tutorials, I'll walk you through the features of Flexcom's user interface in order that you can make the most out of it and maximize your productivity. So we're looking at an opening screen from Flexcom. You can see that it's divided up into a number of different windows, and I'll explain briefly what all of these windows individually do, and then in subsequent tutorials we'll probably go into a little bit more detail on each one. What we're looking at on the center of the screen now at the moment is called the Flexcom's keyword editor. This is where you type in the data which you use to construct your models and run your simulations. Just behind the keyword editor is what's called the table editor. It's just another input mechanism for defining your input properties for the model. So you can use either the table or the keyword editor depending on whatever your preferences are. Personally, I prefer to use the keyword editor because I've got quite a lot of experience with the program and I find it much faster to work directly with these keyword or command driven inputs. But new users like yourselves may prefer to work with the table editor, and I'll cover both in just a few moments. On the right hand side we have the model view, which is a graphical representation of the actual model that you're constructing, and when you've finished running a time domain simulation, you can actually play back and view the structural response as a function of time. On the left hand side here we have what's called the file view, and this is basically like Windows Explorer. It acts as a placeholder for your project workspace, so you can see all the input and output files that you have in the project, and you can open and close files and run simulations from the file view. Just underneath the file view is called the analysis status view. This is to show you the progress of simulation. So if you're running one simulation, it will show you how far it's gone and how much time is remaining. If you're running a lot of like a large batch of runs, you can see what the progress of each one is in the batch. And at the very bottom of the screen here we've got this keyword syntax issues window, which means that if I make some mistakes when I'm defining the inputs in terms of the keyword or table editor, they'll be highlighted down here and will give me some explanation messages as to what I've done wrong. All of these windows are resizable. You can hit the X button to hide the window, or you can move them around on screen. So for example, I could dock the keyword syntax issues window there, but I probably prefer to keep it down below, just to sit underneath the keyword editor. Likewise, the file view, I tend to keep that on the left, but I could also just lift and drag, pop it over on top of the model view on the right. So if you want to move a window, you just click on the top bar of the window and you can just move. You can make it full screen. You can put it wherever you want really. So let's just put the file view back where I got it, and I just need to move the model view as well. Let me just do that. Pop this over on the right. So let me just the analysis status view back. Sorry, just bear with me for one moment until I get my windows back together. And at any point, if you happen to lose a window, for example, it gets hidden and you can't find it, you can actually just go to the tools menu, and there's the reset user interface layout button, which is quite handy. If you've messed up your layout and you want to restore it, you just go to Tools, Flexcom Settings, Reset User Interface Layout. So I'll just close the file view for the moment, and I'll close the analysis status view, and I'll actually just close the model view as well, so we can just focus on a couple of key windows. So this is the keyword editor, which is the one I want to introduce to you at the moment. It's divided up into a number of sections. First thing you can do is you can collapse sections that you don't want. So you can go to Edit, Folding, Collapse All Blocks. That just makes it much more easy for you to pick and choose what sections you want to modify. So in this model, it's a fairly straightforward model. I've got a pre-processor section which I define some parameters beforehand. These are like hand calculations like I could do in Excel or a spreadsheet, but instead of doing them in a spreadsheet, I'm doing them directly in Flexcom itself. The model is where I actually construct the model, so I define the ocean, the properties of the model, define any lines and assign structural and hydrodynamic properties and so on, and load cases where I define the solution conditions, be it sort of static or dynamic analysis, time stepping, etc., and any loading and boundary conditions. And then post-processing I would use to extract results following a successful simulation. So let's just open one keyword just for illustrative purposes. This is the internal fluid keyword, which I'm using to flood a riser with oil in this case. And you can see that I'll just comment out the keyword and I'll reconstruct it. So these comment buttons are very handy at the top. If you press this green button, it comments out the inputs. This means that the inputs are no longer part of your input deck. You can still see them, but they're colored in green, which means they're not really going to be used in the simulation. So if I just want to reconstruct this just to show you, I'll start typing internal, and you can see as soon as I've typed start in, it pops up a list of keywords in the lowercase section. I can pick out the one I want. So I select internal fluid, and then I press the return or the enter key, and it auto completes. So you'll see the keywords are always prefixed by a star, and then the keyword itself appears in bold. If I hit the return key, you can see that I'm auto prompted for the next line. So this shows you how the keyword editor is really easy to use. Even if you're a brand new user to Flexcom, keyword editor is very intuitive. So it's looking for an element set name. So I will type set equals. So you can see that the tag or the first part of that entry is hardwired. You have to type that in exactly as you see it. Set equals, and then as soon as you see I've typed the set in, it prompts me for a list of all of the possible element sets within that steep riser, steep S riser. Just turn that back on again so you can see the model view. So you can see there I've got a riser, I've got a lower catenary, a buoyant section, and an upper catenary already defined. So let me just set all or riser, it doesn't really matter, they both contain all the elements. And then it prompts me for all of the different inputs that it requires or it could accept on this next line. So the first entry is the level above mud line, which can be, let's say, 300 meters. The mass density of fluid is 880 kilogram per meter cubed. Then you can optionally put in some kind of pressure above hydrostatic. So you can just type those values in, or in this case you can actually reference a predefined parameter, which I'll show you the parameters window as well. So that could be depth, so I can set the internal fluid height to be equal to the depth of the ocean. So it's very easy to use and very intuitive. You can hover your cursor over any input and you can see what the units are. In this case it's kilogram per meter cubed. Pressure is in newtons per meter squared. I could type in an explicit value of pressure as well there if I wanted. I can maybe make that 18 megapascals. We'll cover this in subsequent tutorials. So you can Flexcom can accept your own user-defined units, or you can just go with the default ones. But for now I just want to cover what the actual keyword editor does. So let's just quickly look now at the alternative editor, which is the table editor, and you'll see how the keyword editor is broken down into different sections called preprocessor, model, lowercase, etc. And exactly the same breakdowns appear on the table editor on top. So I'll go into lowercase section on top and I'll search for internal fluid. You can use this bar in the middle to make the keyword editor bigger or smaller depending on which your preference is. So I'll just make it a little bit smaller for the moment as we move to the table editor. So this is the exact same information, just in tabular form, or it's almost like a window, or more of a traditional UI type of format. And obviously if you've no experience with the software, all the columns are clearly labeled so you can see what the set names are. I'll give you a drop down for all the set names. You can type in your value for any of these inputs. They've all got nice units on them so you can see exactly what it's accepting. But so if I change this from 880, let's just say, up to 1025 kilograms, so I'm filling it with seawater, you can see that this number has changed from 1025, and it's also changed down here. I can change this back to 880, and you can see that the table editor has changed. So both table and keyword editor operate in live synchronization. They're both in tandem with each other. So it doesn't matter which input deck you use, they both have the effect of putting some data into Flexcom. I'll just switch on. You can just, if you prefer, you can just swap the order of them, but I normally keep the keyword editor on the bottom and I minimize the table editor. I'll just turn on another window now, which is called the keyword syntax issue window, which we saw earlier as well, just minimize. So if I was to make a mistake here and type in, let's say, a minus number for that there, so obviously you can't have a negative density. So once this is highlighted in a pink background, and if I hover my cursor over it, you can see that it says that this must be a positive number. It also echoes this problem down here in the keyword syntax issue, and it tells me the line number. So this file is very short. It's quite a small input check, but imagine if you had a very complex model with maybe, I don't know, hundreds if not 1,000 lines of data, then it could be very helpful for you just to identify the problem in this keyword syntax issues window, double click on the entry there, and it takes you directly to the line. So I'll just cover that again. If there are any problems, you find them in the keyword syntax issues, double click on the issue and it takes you directly to the offending line. Just some other features, I guess, in the keyword editor. I'll just close this keyword syntax issues again just to give us more room. You can just use Control Home to move to the top, Control N to move to the bottom. It's like a standard text editor. You can use Control F to bring up a find, so I can find the internal fluid. I can use Control H to bring up replace function, so you can replace all or just replace one entry. And there's also a go to. Control G will take you to a particular line. So Control F is find, Control H is replace, and Control G is go to. And you can find all of these commands under the edit menu as well. So find, replace, go to. And you can also the comment buttons are also here, but it's much easier to use the comment buttons on the top menu bar because you can access them much more readily. So if you wanted to just comment out a block of data, select it with your mouse, and you can use this comment on or comment off, which is a very handy button. This is comment, this is uncomment, and this is invert comments, so it can transfer back and forth. So I've commented those out, and I'm putting them back in again. So I'll just keep with the internal fluid keyword because I started on that. If you need some more information in terms of what this keyword actually means, or what these inputs mean, you can just select anywhere on the keyword or anywhere on the table, and then you can press the F1 button. The F1 button brings up some online help, which I'll just maximize there so we can see it a little more clearly. So it tells you what the keyword format is, which should be obvious from the keyword editor. It explains all the information in the table in just more detail, and explains all the options, give you some more additional information in terms of notes, and it also hyperlinks to some theory sections about the internal fluid. So how gravity forces are modeled, how centrifugal forces are modeled for a flowing fluid, and so on. And this is all linked to Flexcom's online help. So you can see you quickly go from very simplistic basic information into much more detailed background theory, and that adds to the experience of using the software. There's even references to papers and so on in the help menu. I'll just try to keep these tutorials very short, so I probably won't dwell too much on the user interface anymore. I have other aspects which I want to cover, but for now I hope that you've learned enough about the keyword editor, what it does, the table editor, which is just an alternative representation of that, and the model view. The model view is a very useful component. Obviously we'll cover that in much more detail in a subsequent tutorial, but it lets you see your model. You can zoom in and out, you can rotate and pan and zoom, you can look at different angles of your system. You can even split it up into two different windows, so you can zoom in on let's say we zoom in on the vessel here, and then in the other one we can maybe zoom in on a touchdown location or something like that, and you can play these in live synchronization. So the model view has got quite a lot of features, and I don't propose to cover those now. I will cover those in a subsequent tutorial. So that concludes the first tutorial on Flexcom's user interface. In the next tutorial I'd really like to cover the file view in more detail, and also how you actually go about running simulations and the analysis status window and so on. But I'll just leave that tutorial here for now. Hopefully you've gained some insights from it, and hopefully you can join me in the next tutorial in the series.